This is Jesse Hensley.
This is Josh Turner.
And this is Chris Bow.
Welcome to Turn Down for What?
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Another week and another fun episode for you. So today we have Jesse Hensley back in action. We have the wonderful Chris Bow. And today we have the unique opportunity to speak to Ben. Where are you located, Ben?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ben Westby. I live in rural Colorado, just a little bit north of Glenwood Springs, for those who are familiar with the area, but I'm on the western slope. So I'm about on a good day, I'm at about a 3-hour drive from Denver.
Awesome. And so, we have the crew together, and we wanted to spend today's episode to kind of have a unique discussion around some of the interesting use cases that we can get and kind of the multi-purposeness of an electric vehicle. Ben, you own a Lightning. Can you tell us what type of Lightning it is, like model and trim, and what when you obtained it?
Absolutely. So I picked up the truck on November 17th. It is a standard range pack. It's the XLT trim. It's got the antimatter blue. I think it's pretty great. Back in August, Ford had reopened the order banks for the Pro trim. And so I dived in as soon as I could to get an order in through my local dealership in Glenwood Springs. But however, I kept getting some emails that production was just going to be a little bit delayed. And there's a brand new program here in Colorado. It's kind of like a cash for clunkers. And so you can apply to be in this program. And basically, the state of Colorado will take a 10-year-old or older ICE vehicle and give you a $6,000 voucher to deduct the point of sale at the dealership. And so the particular dealership that I was working with hadn't yet been authorized for that program, because the dealer has to get authorized through that. And there happened to have been a dealership about 4 hours away from me that just received this XLT. They were part of the program, and they were trying to clear out the 2023 inventory. So they offered me $4,000 in dealer discounts. I had this new program that I was a part of. Colorado, outside of that program, offers $5,000 as a tax rebate during tax season. And then because I'm an elementary school teacher, most of my summers, many of the breaks that I have from teaching, I'm usually doing 1099 work or some sort of independent contracting work. So I usually can take advantage of most of the federal credit that is available at tax time. So at the end of the day, I was able to get an XLT Lightning standard range with $23,000 worth of incentives deducted from the price of the truck.
That's awesome.
Wow. Only
Yeah.
minorly jealous there.
I hate that.
And Ben, do you still get, because Colorado also has like a $5,000 state incentive too, right?
Yeah,
So
that's one of the ones I was mentioning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you got the
there's
federal,
there's state, the cash for clunker program,
wow,
and then the dealer discounts.
amazing.
And then at the time, I had a Tesla Model 3. I sold that on the private market. So out of my own pocket, the truck was $12,000, $500.
Wow.
Yeah.
Winner all day, man.
You're the type of person that shows up at a grocery store and walks out with $7,000 worth of product.
Jesse froze.
$7,000 worth of product. Ta-da! This is what we get for having Jesse driving around. Continue, Jesse. $7,000 of product. Continue. We didn't get the rest of the sentence.
Oh, for the coupons that you trade in. You're the guy that has all those coupons, and you trade them in.
Yeah.
I am a coupon clipper. That's true. But I mean, to be fair, I'm an elementary school teacher. I am the main breadwinner of the household. So I've got to be really smart with my budget.
What do you mean?
Hey.
Elementary school teachers get what, $200,000 a year in Colorado? Is that how much?
That's that California money, man. My wife's a school teacher out here, and she does okay. Not 200,000 okay, but it's I know There was a time we were looking to move possibly to Arizona, possibly to Colorado, and
Mhm.
the reason we didn't pull the trigger for a couple job opportunities I had was because the school teachers in those states, it's a lot different
Yeah.
than California. So
Yeah.
good for you, man. Good for you for one being a teacher, like, as someone that's married to one, I know what that's like. And then just what a great deal you made, man. I'm just taking advantage of every incentive out there. I wish more states would have things like that. That's really awesome.
You get a brand new truck for the equivalent of $12,000. That's nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I will say this when I talk about it like on the internet with it, there are folks who are saying, well, that Tesla money could have been like other things. Like, so at the end of the day, like the truck without using the Tesla money was $37,000. But for me, it's just, the budget that I sold the Tesla, that money was in a
Yeah,
vehicle. So I'm going to put that money back into a vehicle. So, yeah. So after using, that money for that purpose, yeah, it was 12,000 bucks out of my pocket.
and I mean we've discussed it on the podcast before. I mean, affordability wise, that you can't go out and buy an XLT gas truck right now and get it under 40,000 if you wanted
No.
to. I mean, to get a 4-wheel drive base XLT is going to cost you 45 to 50 grand. So I mean,
Yeah.
you got the uniqueness and the savings of the Lightning long term, and obviously, as we're about to discuss some of the unique use cases of it, at a discount for a brand new vehicle that there's not going to be an equivalent on the gas front. So now that we've obviously hinted at it, tell us what you have done and what you are doing as far as the use of that Lightning.
For sure. So to give a little bit of background, my wife and I are foster parents from Garfield County. So we do a lot of driving. And so one of the reasons for appointments, doctor visits, things like that, for whenever a child comes into our home, there's about 4 or 5 different kind of appointments that need to happen. So on average, we drive 25 to 30,000 miles in a year. And so switching to electric just mathematically made a lot of sense. Even if an EV is a little bit more expensive than an ICE at the outset of purchase, this savings that are recouped after that. So one of the biggest reasons, first of all, to get an EV was just for those gas price deductions and maintenance costs. And but in the process of being foster parents, we adopted two bio sisters in that process. We were living in a small little town home here in town, about a mile away from my classroom. And we really wanted to have an opportunity for our family to just really kind of become a family, build memories, do things together. So we wanted to raise our girls up on some land. But here in Western Colorado, apparently living in the mountains is really expensive to buy a home. So I think that's most people everywhere. But the closest we could buy land for our family was about 16 miles out of town, up in a region called the Flat Tops. And so we are inside a national forest and there's no utility. And so the home is completely off grid. We completely rely upon solar panels. If we have the last 2 weeks, we had some really cloudy days. And so normally we'd be hooked up into a propane generator. And then at nighttime, we run off of a battery storage system. The first year that we moved there, we were living off of flooded lead acid batteries. And those type of batteries, if anyone's familiar with like marine batteries, you can only get down to about a 50% charge state, and then it has to basically be shut off, or else you're going to damage the batteries. And so we were living off about 4,000 watts for nighttime use. And when we get into this time of year, that's a really big challenge for a family of four.
Yeah.
So for one thing, we were teaching our kids how to be mindful of what it is that we use. We have a domestic well, so we have our own water source. We cut and split our own wood for our heat. We have a wood stove as our heat source. So there's a lot of things that as a family we have to do together just to make just living comfortably work. But once Ford announced that they had the Pro Power capabilities in the Lightnings, being able to generate 9,600 watts of power was very, very tempting. But at the time, I had a Cybertruck order, And I was always like, well, maybe like, the Cybertruck's coming out in a year. It sounds like it's going to be coming out in a year. It sounds like it's going to be coming out pretty soon. I placed an order for a rear-wheel drive Cybertruck back when we were still living in town. And now that we live, 16 miles outside of town, 3,000 feet higher than what town is at, deep in a national forest, we need all-wheel drive. Last year, we had about 9 feet total of snowpack. It looked like I put some photos out on my Twitter account, my X account. I don't know what we're supposed to call it these days.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
No one in my physical world environment is on it. So I have no one to talk to about being on Twitter or anything. So I'm like, hey, are you on Twitter or X? And I'm just on it. But I have photos. We had a 2010 Ford Flex, and I had a picture of the driveway where the snow is a couple feet higher than the Ford Flex. It just felt like you're on a luge heading into town. And so all-wheel drive was pretty much a requirement for us. And so I knew that Cybertruck order that I made was going to have to be altered in some way. But then off realizing that, for one, it's going to be $100,000. And for two, by the time they get to the wheel drive version, it's going to be a couple years down the line. And we're now living in a place where we need a truck now. I started pursuing a Lightning. And that was probably 6 to 8 months ago. And it's just it was just calling dealerships. Do you have anything on the lot? Do you have anything on the lot? And the fruit of that was I was able, like, in this time of year, I had a couple people call me back, especially about that XLT that we purchased. But a requirement for myself personally was that it would have the Pro Power, because it has that 240 volt plug, and we have a 240 volt outlet that can wire into our generator's transfer switch. And so then that allows us to completely drop our propane generator as a backup power source. And I don't know if you guys, have propane at your home, but it's expensive. We have 1,000-gallon propane tank, and it's about $2,300 to fill that sucker up.
Yeah, it was one of the big things I loved. Yeah, when I was just seeing your post and your story, it was like a kindred spirit, from everything, I had out here in California. It's a different scenario. I'm not living on a mountaintop, but we would have the rolling blackouts and the power safety shutoffs and all these things that were happening from our utility. And so I went and bought a propane backup generator, and that's what I was running at the house. And then same exact scenario. I'd ordered the Cybertruck. I've got the single motor rear wheel drive. It's not going to be available till 25.
And not at the price that they advertised.
Not at the price, right?
We've been talking about like budget. Classroom teacher. I'm trying to be smart with my money. $39,000, and I've got a Colorado incentive. That's affordable.
Yeah,
not where it's at now.
And California has got some smaller incentives. I didn't get 5,000 or any of that kind of stuff, but we had I got 2,500 out of the state of California. I traded in an old minivan. I mean, very similar stories, and just to kind of see what you've done with it, and that Pro Power for me was the game changer. That was the real big difference maker, was that Pro Power, being able to plug it in straight to the house using my existing connection, was just a game changer for me. And then you took that, and I also have just the standard range. I'm not balling out like Joss and Jessie with their right. But I love hearing it because it's so functional, it's so useful, it's affordable, and I just think the whole story of it, man, is next level. And what I really appreciate is I'm a big advocate of trying to convince people that are in my orbit, that are kind of a conservative bent, who maybe just for whatever reason, when you look at the stats, there's a lot of conservatives out there who kind of recoil. They don't want to be told by the government what to drive. But I mean, everything you're talking about right now, right, is liberty, it's freedom, it's independence, it's the ability to do all the things, living off the land, cutting your own wood, out in the national forest, off the grid. I mean, this stuff should just resonate with so many people. And so I love circulating that story of the EV, that it's not just the California and Floridas and Texas and upper upper northeastern kind of corridor that can use an EV. It's useful out in Colorado. It's useful out in Tennessee. It's useful in these areas. And then you've even, if I understand right, you even got like a little bit of a farmland. Like I think you towed a trade. Like tell us about that. Like
So one of my favorite things that I did the day after I bought the truck and got home, we went to our local feedlot to get some chicken feed. We have chickens, we have goats. In the summertime, we've got about 2,000 free-ranging sheep that come up to our property. So we have this land lease agreement with some local ranchers. So our property is technically labeled as agricultural status because we lend out our land for free ranging herds, but we still have some of our own animals as well. And the next day I went straight to the feedlot, popped open the trunk because one of their things that they like to serve people come and show up, and so they load your truck for you. And so I'm the blue F-150 over there. Popped the trunk open, and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, oh yeah, just put the feed inside that front trunk. We call it a frunk. And they're putting it in there, just like looking at it, and they're like, what? And then they notice the outlets in the front, and then I'm like, oh yeah, and we're gonna get some some bales of hay too, and so as they're loading it up, I'm talking about the Pro Power that's on there, and I was like, it's just an F-150, it's just electric, and it was just like it just blew their minds that a pickup truck could be electric and that it could work out. At the local grocery store, I had the frunk open. I use my frunk every day. I think that storage space is awesome.
Absolutely.
And so we use it for grocery shopping, for feed, all that other stuff. And I had somebody come up to me and ask me if I needed help. And I'm like, I can't find my engine. It like fell out on the interstate. Why? There's no engine in here. Where did it go? And the guy just looked at me and was like, this thing's electric, isn't it? Like he was not taking the joke. He was just like, whatever. Okay, fine. I just stopped to help. But it's just this thing has so much utility to it. Even if I wasn't living off grid, just having a family, our backpacks, our scooters, our animals that we have. My wife works from home. We have Starlink. And so that allowed her to be able to work from home. But there's so many things that we pack into that truck that doesn't have to go into the cabin. And the that super cab is already so spacious. And our girls are now becoming preteens. They're getting taller and bigger, and they come with more, they're not in car seats anymore, but their stuff is just getting bigger and more. They love using the outlets, and so we come up to our house. I can plug it in when the sun goes down, and each of our girls can have a space heater running for a couple hours in their bedroom, get their bedroom at a comfortable temperature, because our only main source of heat's a wood stove, and that takes time to heat up the whole house, especially if we've been gone all day. The zone lighting for us has been really huge because we're deep inside a national forest. There's no utility. We have no street lights. It is pitch black. And so one of my favorite things actually is it's like this super underrated feature, but the zone lighting, just having all the LED lights on and bright, really makes it a game changer for us to be able to navigate walking around our property at night, being able to put animals away, and not having to turn on, or carry flashlights and things. And so that's been really helpful for us, especially as it's been just getting darker and darker as we get closer to the winter. But I mean, this truck just has so many features. It just makes living off grid a little bit more comfortable. And people are like, well, off grid is supposed to be rough and hardy and tumble. It's like, well, when you got a family of 4 and 3 of them are ladies, there's some level of comfort you got to build in there. You can't just be a rugged mountain man the whole time you're up there. But it also just makes the longevity of our ability to be up there, being able to power our house and be able to use a lot of appliances or utilities in the dark when we don't have to rely on actually just pulling from our battery bank from our house. My wife can feel like she can cook a big meal when the sun goes down instead of having to do a bunch of things while the sun is up. And so it just kind of made our comfort level of life just a little bit that much better. for us to be able to just do winter up here. Three seasons out of the year, it's usually not much of a problem, but solving for winter living off grid had been something we've been working on the last couple of years, and this has really changed the game for that.
Yeah, I mean, having 98 kilowatt hours of battery available for discharge, I mean, that's very reliable to hold you through at least a night session, and refueling during the daytime with solar and other instances. But that's one of those things that, all of us, all three of us, outside of you, all have Lightnings as well, and we all love our trucks for different reasons. But none of us are off grid. We had a guest a couple of weeks ago that he uses his battery pack to charge his vehicles because charging publicly, made sense, and so he brought it home and charged his e-scooter with it, and he charged his inflatables and other parts of his house with it. But for me, it made sense because gas savings and all the traditional things, and the frunk is great, but the off-grid use case is something that obviously it's a part of it, but it's one of those things that with your truck, even with the small battery pack, not the extended range, the standard range, you still have 100 kilowatt hours of storage available to output into your life, especially being the fact that you're completely detached from the grid. It's a very interesting use case to be able to actually go out and power your house, because I mean, most houses don't even use 100 kilowatts in a day, unless it's really cold and you're using a lot of heat source. But that's one of those things that, I mean, you can run your house off of that. Obviously, you have your inverter switch. Do you have any intention of actually installing the direct connect, like the what's the system called?
Home integration system from Sunrun.
Or do you intend just to keep it with what you have with the cords?
If it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. If it works, and I think also just that I think that home integration system is really expensive.
It really is. Yeah,
I think it's like
$13,000.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, that's how much like a Tesla Powerwall is. Now I think for right now it's okay. I've contemplated making something a little bit nicer, as like a aesthetic layout, but it's also one of those things where like it doesn't have to look pretty to be functionality over with aesthetics. So
do you charge your truck primarily from your solar during the day, or do you charge it in town?
So I charge in town. So I'm a classroom teacher, so I'm during the work week, I'm here at Monday through Friday. And there's a public charger, a 5-minute walk from my classroom. And then I'm actually currently working with the school district to install public chargers at each campus within the school district. A lot of staff members have gotten plug-in hybrids or have switched to EVs, and so have a lot of student families. When I go to the parent drop off and pickup loop to bring kids there, bring them back to my classroom, each year more and more families are buying EVs. Families come here for recitals, for assemblies. Our campus is also the trailhead for several biking and hiking trails that go out into the mountains. And it's kind of a perk of living in a Colorado area, as our school actually has trails. But people are here for hours at a time, and that's level 2 charging would be perfect for a student family or for our teacher to come on up and get some charging while at work. But yeah, there's some charging here in town that I use, and it's paid charging, but it's still cheaper. It's about the rate of the utility that was at my townhome here in town. So it hasn't been really that expensive at all. I think I'm operating at like 3 cents per mile in terms of like charging costs. But yeah,
because you're at the top of that mountain, and you can really use regen, right? You can use a ton of that power. You can get it really low. And when you leave the top and you get to the bottom, do you end up at the bottom more charged than when you left? What's that look like for you?
So I'm in my classroom right now. So we came down. There's an event happening in town that my wife has taken her girls to, but today is one of our warmest days that we've had in weeks. It's definitely the warmest day since I've had the truck. our efficiency was 37 miles per kilowatt hour coming
That's
down the
awesome.
mountain. And the truck, I mean, so my commute's a little extreme. So I gained 3,000 feet going home on 16 miles of switchbacks on gravel road in a national forest. So going home, I'm lucky if I get like 1.1 mile per kilowatt hour going up, but the inverse, like I come back down and I can probably regain 5 to 8% coming down. And there was one instance when we owned a Tesla, my wife wasn't quite paying attention to how much charge the battery was on, drove on up. And this is something else I wanted to mention about the Lightning versus the Tesla that I've experienced. But the Tesla actively uses energy to use that thermal management system. And so you could pull up with the Tesla like 30%, but then the next morning it's down to like 21% because it was just using energy to keep itself warm. And one time my wife came up and I woke up the next morning and the Tesla's at 0% at our house. And I was looking at my kids and like, get blankets. There's no heaters. We're not running any heat. Like, and we coasted down a bit. And by the time I got to town, I went from 0% to 12%. So as we started getting closer to the school, I'm like, okay, now we can turn on the heat. Now I know we're going to make it. We're going to do it. But that was like the first time I've ever seen my car at 0%. And because overnight it was just, my wife pulled up and it was like 8 or 9%, but it had consumed that overnight. The interesting thing about the Lightning is that it sits overnight. It's unplugged. We have an unfinished detached garage, and I haven't been storing it in there. The truck doesn't seem so far to lose capacity overnight in the winter cold. What does happen is it has a power reduction in the motors. And so that's something that I've been noticing that's kind of a difference. When we parked our Tesla, I was charging our Tesla like every other day because we had the standard range Model 3 with wheel drive. And so that was a 50 kilowatt pack. And that thing just, you drive up and it's consuming 8 or 9% overnight just to keep itself warm, but you had full power going down. With the Lightning, I know if I pull up and I park at the house at like 37%, when I wake up the next morning, and if I didn't use Pro Power, it's going to be at 37%. But I might have a 60% output on the motors rather than a full 100%. So it's really interesting to see how different manufacturers try and handle how their vehicles try and dispense energy or where energy loss occurs. And so I feel pretty good knowing that I can drive up on a low percent and it's not going to the next day really affect the battery, but it is going to affect the performance as I head down. So that's been pretty interesting to see.
But when you're coasting, you don't when you're coasting, you don't really need power.
Right.
But that's one of those things. I mean, obviously, I think the newer Ford F-150 Lightnings will have the heat pump system. I'm curious to see how that affects the battery pack in your type of situation. Obviously, there's an element to keeping the battery warm that helps you with range when it comes to those things. But in your situation, it's honestly better that you have it to where you just have a performance decrease and are able to keep the state of charge. But that's obviously an interesting, point when it comes to actually protecting the longevity of the battery compared to the Tesla option.
Yeah.
And that's really the great thing about like having these conversations is learning that these different EVs and vehicles have almost like a little personality to them.
Yeah.
And finding the one that fits how you're going to use it and what you need. And that's where I love the diversity of products that are out there, all the different types that are available. And there's the more we can do that and the more that we can have that kind of united idea of EVs not being the enemy of each other. It's one of those things where I love that you've had a Tesla, you've had a Ford, and each one had their differences to them. And when your lifestyle changed, your vehicle need changed. And here you are now with a a scenario where this is a much better fit, whereas before maybe the other one was the better fit, and it just depends
Right.
on what you're doing. So sharing the stories like this is just phenomenal.
Well, and one thing that really helped us be confident in this decision was when Jim Farley announced that Ford was going to be
On
integrating the
Nax.
NACS. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And the fascinating thing that Tesla has done is that Colorado was one of those first states that started adapting the Magic Dock connector on the supercharger.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's some other states that did it as well, but in my region of Western Colorado, there are two V3 superchargers. They're not in my immediate region, but in the Western Colorado EV Club, there are some members in the town of Montrose. And that town has a V3 supercharger that went up about a year and a half ago, and that got adapted to a V3. And on Monday, I'm actually going to be taking my girls on a daddy-daughter date because we aren't in school. My wife still has to work. But Moab, that really famous area for off-roading and just desert adventuring.
Yeah.
Moab is about a 3-hour drive from my house, and the V3 supercharger in Moab got adapted to the Magic Dock. So I was going to take my girls down to Moab, just do a little day trip, but then also I wanted to experience how the Magic Dock works. And I hope it works because there are no other CCS options in Moab. They had an old Charge Point 250 that basically died, and the utility company was like, "We're not going to replace this," and so Tesla adapted their V3 supercharger, so they are the only CCS game in town, which is going to be pretty interesting. But
And
You know
still
what it
have your
sounds like you need?
Go ahead, Josh.
I was like, you know what it sounds like you need,
what?
Jesse? What do you think he needs, Jesse?
Don't bring me into this. You're the one that interrupted Chris. Go ahead and make your point.
You need a power up America charger in your area is what I'm saying. There you go.
Actually do. Yeah. NACS and CCS on
Both.
on both. One on one side, one on the other. So
Yeah.
And we can
Yes.
also do level 2 charging. So if you need that for your school system, we can help. But anyways, keep going.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, the other things like a lot of people I talk to about the range on the standard range XLT is like, oh, you can only do like maybe 240 miles, but I'm used to having that type of distance with a standard range Tesla. And to be honest, as a young family, that type of driving distance does not bother me because first of all, day to day, it does not matter. It's just whether or not I have a bigger battery for powering my house, but my commute's only 16 miles one way. And I'm usually charging, and then I go home with a pretty full pack. So it doesn't really bother me. It's just more of like doing the long distance driving. But for instance, this trip to Moab, there's Electrify America halfway there. And so, even if I have to leave my house at an 80 or 70% charge, I'm going to be able to stop and Electrify America. But with my kids, I don't know if you guys have young children, but you're stopping every 2 to 3 hours. It does not matter whether you're driving gas or EV. And I don't know if you have significant others, but my wife's bladder is the size of a pea. And it does not matter. It does not matter what EV we're in. Our bladders never outlast the range of an EV pack. So, I know there's all these diesel bros out there. It's like, it's got to go 500 miles and you got to be able to go doing it while you're towing. I'm just like, I don't know. For my family, it works just fine. We drive 2.5 hours. We stretch our legs for 20, 30 minutes. It's perfect. So
yeah, it's exactly what I've experienced out here is, I can get from here to our state capital, Sacramento, and down to Monterey. And that's the kind of my round trip range. If I need to go further than that, it's exactly what you're talking about. My wife, the kids, I got an 8-year-old and 9-year-old, we're stopping for lunch anyway. We're stopping for the bathroom anyway.
Yeah.
So, here to Southern California, there's a couple spots on the I-5 where we stop and we get lunch, and then we stop before we hit what's called the Grapevine out here, which is a really tall mountain range between kind of Bakersfield and Los Angeles. And those stops are going to have to happen anyway. So I'm not a pee in a bottle kind of guy and drive for 8 hours. And I don't think my wife would appreciate that at all. So no, it's exactly what you say. And so you're gonna be able to go from your house to an Electrify America, and then what 80% there will get you to Moab, and then at the supercharger with the Magic Dock, you'll be able to get back to that EA at 80% because you're only going to do 80%, right? 90, I guess. And
well, the other thing is I'm still learning the XLT in a lot of ways. So when I left the dealership, that was about 4 hours away from me. That the dealership to my town, not my house, but my town, is about 215 miles. And so I've got two towns in between me that have an electrify or have a good CCS charging. So there's Glenwood Springs, and they have an Electrify America. And then there's Rifle, Colorado, and they have a 200 kilowatt output charge point at a come and go gas station. That's what it's called around here. I don't know why it's named that way, but that's what
I've heard of them. Yeah.
So
I've heard of them too.
I'm basically smack in between both towns. And so from the dealership to the Glenwood Springs Electrify America was 215 miles. And
it's right on the edge. That's on the edge of your.
I had 12% remaining on the path.
Wow.
Now I went up 2 mountain passes. So, I'm doing a lot of consumption getting up Vale Pass and Eisenhower Tunnel, but I'm also regenning almost all of what I recouped back into the pack, heading back down. And then from Vale Pass to Glenwood Springs, it's all downhill. So the efficiency is, heading west is phenomenal. And so I left from Loveland, Colorado, which is about 4 hours away, and got all the way to Glenwood Springs with 12% remaining on the pack. So like the real world range for me driving the mountains in the winter is pretty much what the EPA rated range is. And when I was driving our Tesla, I sold it with about almost 90,000 miles on the pack. And I think once or twice have I ever went above 200 miles on that standard range pack, even though on the website at the time it was advertised 240, 250, something like that. So I
think it's a lot of what you talk about too, though. It's the way, and I know in Rivian's case, and then they've gotten better. They have the vampire drain that kind of takes some stuff away. With the Tesla, it's actively managing the battery pack, and in your case with the cold. Out here in California, I have a buddy that is in a Model Y, and he lives in the Central Valley where it gets really hot, like in 112. And he had the kind of that wake up moment you did, where he parked his car and it was actively cooling the battery. And even there's a setting on the Tesla you might have used. I don't know if it works both ways, heat and cold, where it would actually, if the temperature in the cabin of the car got above,
exceeded a certain number, it would
cool it.
Yeah.
So he woke up.
You can disable that, but then it'll warn you that it could like hurt the computer that's inside the car. But
he got a tent for it. He got like a tent for it and disabled it because it was just killing. It was just killing his battery when it was sitting out there. And so he didn't have a garage he could put it in. So he put like one of those tents to help kind of cool it a bit. But that is exactly what you're talking about. So you might in reality only get 200 miles or less out of the Tesla because it's actively trying to do so much. And so part of that is definitely part of that driver experience that you've had.
Yeah.
I think in general, like we're discussing, I mean, every vehicle has its different use case, and standard range and extended range batteries for different people. And most Americans' use case, and this was my argument that I've made, was most Americans, they go and commute to work 99% of the year. And so the question is, for the size of your battery pack, how many trips a year do you take that you actually need to use range? And the reality is do you care to stop and stretch your legs for 15 minutes every 2 hours, 3 hours of driving? And if your goal is to drive 400 miles without stretching your legs, then good on you. But I mean, the average person, like you said, I've never been with young kids to a rest stop that's not taking 25 minutes when it comes to getting everybody out of the car, restrooms, walked around and all that. But that's one of those things. Obviously, range plays a factor, but really the average person never really needs it. My wife, she drives a minivan. Now I'm trying to get her into an electric vehicle. But she's, hesitant, like, well, we're both EVs then. What then? And I'm like, hey, you pick up the kids from school every day, you drive to the grocery store, and maybe one time a year we take it on a road trip. And I mean, if you're saving $8,000 a year on gas, and we have to stop one extra time for 20 minutes on a road trip to the beach or whatever, it's like that's not the end of the world. Now, if you're somebody that tows boats from Tennessee to Colorado back and forth all the time, maybe an EV truck is not for you. Maybe you should stick with your gas powered or hybrid or something like that to make sense. But the average person's not towing hundreds of miles and traveling hundreds of miles 5 times a month. Jessie and I have gotten to really wear out and test out the extended rangeness of our batteries because we've been traveling a lot for power up. And so, I mean, we get to use the charging infrastructure, which is what it is for now. But we have to maximize battery usage and drive hours and hours. I mean, Jessie's been driving twice a week, 6 hours north, 6 hours south, dealing with the charging network. And so in that use case, extended range makes sense because his trip would take 2 hours longer twice a week. I mean, that does make a difference. But for the average person who takes a road trip once a year, definitely something that it's just everybody has different use cases. And I would never tell, in my opinion, me personally, I would never tell that person that needs to haul trailers long distances in EVs right for you. Not until that tech improves and range is up there. But for the average American, 95% of the population, there's a different product for everything and something that could be a good fit for you. So,
well, and the interesting thing too is on a long distance road trip, it's really just that initial charge that really makes a difference. Because a typical EV's charge curve, as most of your listeners may know, is the lower your pack is when you pull into a charger, the better peak rate you're going to be getting and the better charging curve you're going to experience. So an extended range pack benefit is really huge on that first leg, because you're going to be able to maybe skip a charger that the standard range couldn't have.
That's a great point.
But once you get past that, everyone's doing that charger hop because you're trying to get that peak rate and just maximizing the efficiency of your charging. We drove typically by the time we get to March, my whole family, we're just sick and tired of winter because winter goes all the way through April for us. So we try to go to San Diego for our spring break at the end of March. And we're planning on doing that again this year. But when we do that in our standard range Tesla, we could maybe make it to Green River, Utah, which is where there's a problematic EA there, but there's also a very old V2 supercharger there. So no matter what you're driving, everyone's experience at Green River, Utah is never great. But we once drove an all-wheel drive Tesla that had the long range, and we were easily able to make it to Green River with money on the pack. But it just meant that we had a slower charging experience there because I didn't realize how much would still be on the pack when we got there. But ever since that leg, we were hitting the same stops that we would have been hitting in our standard range pack because we were trying to maintain that peak efficiency in our charging. So that first leg was the only one where it really mattered. And outside of that, we were still hitting the same chargers we had taken the year previously. So
I'm curious what you experienced with the Lightning, because although the peak charge isn't as high as the Tesla can get, the charge curve holds closer.
It goes way into the pack. That surprised me. I was at a 72%. I was still holding 130 kilowatts.
Yes.
I was whoa, it drops like a rock after 80%. But if you're needing to charge past 80%, you're going to be white knuckling it anyways. But one of the big things for me is I drive like a grandpa. I'm not a lead foot. So
I'm the opposite of Jessie.
I'm a perfect candidate for driving a standard range pack because I'm going to be driving for I'm an efficiency, I'm not a hyper miler, but I love trying to see what I can get out of my pack. And so I did an experiment. So during one summer, I dedicated some time driving for Uber. And I would go to Grand Junction, which is about 70 miles away. I'd usually take somebody there. and there's a regional airport over there. And so one day I drove going 5 miles under the speed limit to get there, and I arrived with like 20% more on my battery pack than when I went at the speed limit. And then when I did another drive later that week where I went above the speed limit by 5 miles an hour, and it was like a huge hit on my range. But the difference in time was like 8 minutes. If I went under the speed limit by 5 miles an hour, I got there 8 minutes later than if I went like the actual speed limit. And so it's just like, at the end of the day, I mean, it's speeding is great. You know, you feel like you're moving, but the physics and reality of it is you're not really saving time, and you could have had 20% more in your pack. So
those are rookie numbers. We need to pump those numbers up. If you're not going 70 or 80 miles over the limit, then you're just not doing it right.
Yeah, Jesse's the opposite end of the spectrum, you know, which is the beauty of the options, right? Because Jesse's he's getting to the speed limit quickly, as Josh likes to say, and you're doing the long distance road warrior driving. So yeah, you know, what are you getting, Jesse, on your miles per kilowatt out when you're doing your road trips?
So I have done the same thing. I've traveled at 15 over the limit, 10 over the limit, 5 over the limit, and at limit. And at 15 on the interstate, that puts me at around 1.5 to 1.4.
That's like Ben driving uphill. We got some guests on Jesse's truck today.
I've got kids today. Yes,
good to see you guys.
Be the one to pick them up. So I've got everybody with me today.
The ultimate family vehicle.
You want to say hi?
Me and Jessie have compared stats though, and I'm curious, Ben, what you end up getting. But I mean, my lifetime average of my truck, and it's a lot of highway miles, but my lifetime average is 2.3. Which, I mean, if you do the math, that's right at the 320 range. A lot of around town, but a lot of highway.
Yeah.
If I'm around town, I'm seeing probably 2.5 to 3, just regular up and downs, but not like steep hills. But highway, I'm averaging 2 to 2.1 when I'm going 75-ish on my range. Now, Jesse, for some reason, he drives the same speed and gets like 1.6, 1.7. I don't know how that works.
He gets there quicker.
But have you taken it on a distance endeavor, and what efficiency are you seeing there?
Yeah, so on the odometer I have about 1,500 miles. So it is still, I mean, it's still
breaking it in.
Still breaking it in. My trip to and this is because I'm a data nerd. Like that is going to be my lifetime. Trip 2 is just going to be the lifetime efficiency average. Right now, that's sitting at 2.0 for 1,500 miles, but I picked it up November 17. Like, this thing has not seen a warm day. It has not seen anything but snow. So I know that that's going to change as we get into the warmer weather. My trips down the mountain are going to be that much more extreme in terms of regen and efficiency. When we drove a week ago to do some Christmas shopping in the town of Grand Junction, it's like the big city for us, I was averaging 2.2 on the interstate going 75, but I'm going from town, which our elevation here is about almost 6,000, down to 4,000 feet at Grand Junction. And then coming back, I was getting about 1.8 coming back up that same elevation. But my house's elevation is 9,000 feet. So it's quite an extreme gain to go from town up to my house.
Well, and your numbers are going to be thrown off too, because unfortunately it doesn't have, and hopefully in the future it'll have the ability to run the Pro Power without having the truck physically on, and maybe will, I think that's coming in an over-the-air update sometime in the future. But right now the truck has to physically be on, and it doesn't have a way, and I don't know if in the future it will, but it doesn't differentiate between generator power of Pro Power versus travel power. So so it throws off your numbers, because
there's that one feature on the main screen where you can kind of take a look at the lifetime energy usage. And so my trip two, like 17% of my power has been to accessories, which I'm
Right.
guessing is pro power. But my truck is never going to show a high efficiency in transportation because
Because of the way you use it.
it's always going to show that like pro power usage as a percentage of that.
Yeah,
I will
and
tell
that'll
you,
be
just as a disclosure, just so you can prepare yourself, my truck has reset itself on trip two about 5 different times with over-the-air updates, and I've never gotten
Yeah.
over 10,000 miles.
interesting.
So trip two will likely at some point reset. I intended on trip two being my lifetime counter, but it was up to almost 10,000 miles at 2.3, and then it reset. I'm at like almost 30. Jesse's at like 35 to 40 on his truck. But
36.
I've never gotten over 10,000 with mine, but every time I pull up the longest trip, it's always around 2.3 on average.
Okay.
Yeah, my
And I have
don't
the
have-
same thing.
It resets for you when you get an update.
Yeah, I did trip one was my lifetime one. And then after an update it recently reset on me. And so I'm still sitting around 2.4, but 2.4 is that's taking into account now 2 seasons of I run through Christmas decorations at my house off of the Pro Power. I have an inflatable that if I'm around town, I leave the inflatable up in the back of my truck and the Christmas lights. And when I park it at work or a shopping center, I leave the inflatable up. So that's throwing, my typical, if you were to take that, I wish there was a way for it. Typical week is closer to 2.7 because I do a lot of city and commute traffic. So it's not uncommon for me to get about 270 out of it. And I've been as high as just under 3. I'd like to hyper mile it and hit 300 just once. But 2.7 is about my norm, but the average shows 2.4, and it did reset on me a couple different times. So if you're that data nerd, you kind of log them because it will reset at some point, unfortunately.
You get the EPA rating of 320. Yeah. You get the EPA rating of 320 on the extended range, but I mean that means that you're going to get more efficiency around town and less efficiency on the highway. I think it's technically rated, if I remember correctly, like for the extended range 350 city, and I think it's 270 highway, and they come up with the average rating of 320. It's flip flop compared to gas, but that's one of those things. I mean, around town, my commute to work is apparently more uphill. I didn't know that, but I mean, it's more uphill because on average, on the way to work, I will see something like 2.1 on the way there, but on the way back, I'm getting like 4.5. And so if you took that average for that 6-7 mile trek, you're gonna be at an average of almost 4 plus when it comes to those things. So I'm getting 450 mile range when it comes to just straight commute to work and back. But when I start using the interstates and other throughways, then obviously the average adjusts itself. But still, nonetheless, I mean you're seeing some decent efficiencies with the stop and go of around town driving.
It's what Ben and Josh were saying. Or Jessie was saying, where it's that exponential. Every 5 miles, it really does make a difference. But it's funny how, like you said, you start to learn the topography of where you're driving, and you realize if like this way is a little bit more downhill than that way, and it's funny when you start to be able to realize that and see that.
So the interesting thing in that efficiency stuff is that I've been noticing that the truck will pretty much hit what the EPA is saying that it should be hitting. But my poor guessometer, my rangefinder on the dash, that thing has no idea what we can do because of how extreme our elevation gains are and our losses and the cold temps. So, I'll pull up to the house and it maybe, it consumed 1.1 miles per kilowatt hour to get up to the house, and on the way back down, it will be like 30, but I'll pull up to the house and it'll be like 60%. And that poor rangefinder on the dash is going to say that I can do maybe 50 miles. And so the one thing that I've had to just really do is to trust my gut on the math. Now, the eternal math of like, okay, if I'm driving 10 miles on the interstate and in those 10 miles, I've been hitting 2.2, then, and I'm at like 70%, I can calculate what I got left on the tank. I can do that math. I can do that work. I think the hard thing is going to be when somebody who has not done an EV, like, 'cause I've been driving EV since 2019, somebody's going to get an EV for the first time is going to see that, like, if they drove my truck up my commute and then got home and saw that it only had 50 miles left at
They'd
60%,
freak out.
they're going to freak out. And so I don't know what the solution is, other than experience. But I know, like, even in my own gut, I have to, like, tell myself, okay, no, I really can go much, like, I have this many kilowatt hours in the pack. I'm going to be okay. But my brain sees that number and, like, has, like, this internal fight with itself about logic versus what I'm being told. And I do think that would be a hard thing for a new EV owner to be able to come to terms with.
Ours is at least super easy being the standard range, because at 98 kilowatts, pretty much 100, it makes the math really easy. If I'm doing 1.5, 1.7, I'm at 150, I'm at 170, I'm at 220. So it makes it easy in real time to look at that number. And if I continue doing what I'm doing right now, here's what I've got. The standard range makes that a lot easier than the extended, where you're at 130, and now I feel like I'm converting kilometers or something. Now I'm like in the metric system. I'm like, I can't deal with it. I'm not that bright.
There's plenty of times, though, that you're having to trust the percent more than the range, just because of the driving habits. Because that's one of those things that if you're, especially coming like off towing, for your example, you're going uphill, your truck thinks that your efficiency's 1. So when you get back in the vehicle, it's going to say that you have 98 miles of range out of a full charge. And then on the way down, it's like, whoa, we can go 7,000 miles.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's just one of those things you have to trust the percentages until it either learns or they can figure out an adjustment to kind of trust that mechanism.
Yeah.
That anxiety that exists too is going to be going away soon for a lot of people, because, like you're saying, you can get to this EA station that's 150 miles or 200 miles or 180 miles away. Under the NEVI program, most interstate corridors are going to have a station at least every 50 miles. In our state, they put it every 22 and a half to 30 miles on the southern part of a corridor that goes across the state. So that's right now, what you're up against, you're not going to care, ooh, can I pucker and make it to this next one? You'll be like, oh, well, I am going to be running short here. I haven't ran efficiently because I drove like Jessie. I'm going to have to stop at this one coming up in 20 miles instead of making it to the 60 miles. So it's really going to open up the door for people to have more options. And you're going to know, hey, this one only charges me 40 cents, or this one charges 46. Let me go to that next one that goes to 30 cents or whatever. So there's definitely going to be some opportunity for creative marketing and solutions when it starts coming down to where you're wanting to stop.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
I agree.
I agree wholeheartedly. When you don't care anymore.
Yeah. Well, we are actually running short on this episode.
Oh, sure.
We're out of time. It seems to be the weekly concern. We're in the middle of a heavy debate, but we cannot have a 2-hour podcast, unfortunately. So what we will do is we'll put a pin on
the conversation.
And we will continue the conversation sometime in the near future whenever we can get you, Ben, back on the podcast. But thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate the insight and kind of the interesting use case of EVs in general, but specifically your XLT standard range, and excited to see another driver having an interesting use case and how it can obviously make your situation and your life easier for you and your family. So
such a great story.
It's an honor. Thank you for letting me be on here. I'd be happy to be on here again to chat more. Like I said, this coming Monday, I'm doing a little daddy-daughter trip down to Moab. I'm going to give the Magic Dock a try. It's the only CCS game in town. I'd love to talk about that experience later on if you guys would be willing to have me on. But
absolutely,
thank you for coming. My wife always says I need to join a club or be a part of a broader community. That's usually why I'm on Twitter, because I just talk her ear off of this, and she's like, you need to go find some friends and go talk about this stuff.
Give your Twitter /X handle, so people that want to follow your adventures, they can go and look at some of the pictures. Your Christmas tree pictures in the snow were epic. What's your Twitter handle so people can join in the fun?
Yeah, I'm at Ben Westby, all one word. Like when Gmail came out in the early 2000s, and you just made an email and you're just kind of stuck with it. That's just what I did. So it's the last 5 letters of Benjamin. So it's Jammin Westby. And I'm an adoptive foster parent. So I put stuff about that life experience, but also just living off grid in general, being a teacher, driving EVs. I'm an EV coach for the state of Colorado. So sometimes I'll put some stuff out there. But yeah, people can follow me and see what it's like to live in an extreme situation and use an electric vehicle to do so.
Absolutely. Well, everybody check out Ben on X. You can also check us out at TDFW podcast. On nice time to think about the initiative. TDFW podcast on X as well. We post some clips from our show and stuff like that. But follow along, and we'll tune in next week.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Great time, guys.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.